So Fred Short has been leading these IUCN workshop talks for I don't know how many years because I only went to one other conference. Do you know? 2007, so a fair while. He wasn't able to come today at the last minute, so you're stuck with me. I think I just wanted to, I don't like this at all. Okay, maybe if I stand over here, I can't hear myself. So I just wanted to go over a little bit what the IUCN is for anybody who's new here and hasn't heard of this. I can't do this. Can you guys just hear me if I yell? No? Yell harder? Okay, I'll do this. So 1964, IUCN, International Union of Conservation for Nature, I believe, started looking at this barometer of life, recognizing a trend of declining biodiversity globally. And so the IUCN was really developed as a way to standardize the way that we measure species around the globe and puts forward a method for assessing risk of extinction at the global level. So it's really relevant to everybody's work here. And putting the data together, then we can start to see trends in different species or groups of species around the world. And what we're really focused on here is trying to identify populations or species that are vulnerable, endangered, or critically endangered. And we go through this assessment criteria, which the latest version came out in 2001, I believe. And basically the assessment criteria are one of these 5. You can start out by observing a population size reduction, a reduction in the geographic range, a small population size and a reduction in range, small or restricted populations, and then these quantitative analyses. And so these criteria, you can't see this, I know, but I'm just going to tell you, they go in the gray bars are these criteria, and then there's certain bars that you have to be met for it to mean that the species is critically endangered, or vulnerable. Okay, so it's basically a matrix. We put in the data that we have about population trends, and then we get this status. Okay. And Fred did this with a number of researchers, many of whom are in this room, or a few are in this room, in 2011, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, where they were able to identify some of the species of seagrass that may be at risk of extinction globally. And what's really neat is that we get, you can't read this I know also, but these are all of the seagrass species on one side. And then over here you can see the population trends, whether they're decreasing, increasing, or stable. And so this is really a way for us to get a snapshot of what's going on globally. And we'll talk more about this if you come to the workshop on Friday. Fred gave me a list of things to talk about, and I'm kind of hoping that today, I really do hope this runs shorter than a whole hour, but I'm just going to give a little bit of an introduction on the things that Fred thought were really important that were still lingering for him to spark some conversation, and then I want to see if anybody has any ideas. I'm sure some people will, and then I'll take notes and develop that into the workshop so we can get a more comprehensive picture of what we need to talk about, what other people agree we need to talk about, not just Fred. So these are directly from Fred, so I'll try to bumble through him a little bit. So he feels it's really important that we get to discussing a genus and species definition for seagrasses, and then specific topics he wanted us to address were revising the Zostera genera, eliminating a misidentified Zostera, revising the Halodule or Halodule, I'm not sure how you guys, I'm not a tropical seagrass ecologist, and then having a conversation about the Halophila, which I'm hoping Michelle has some insights or ideas about. I don't know a lot about that. So Fred feels like if we're going to talk about a genus definition, that this could be guided by genetic evidence, and when we start to look at species definitions, we look at the taxonomic description and then either having floristic distinction or the genetic variant. So Yeah, so taxonomy and knowing which species we're going to list is the backbone of this. I guess I didn't make that really clear. We have to have some kind of agreement of which species we're assessing to even begin the assessment process, and that's why taxonomy ends up coming into this discussion. And then on top of that, we also need really clear population trends, right? So this is kind of the backbone. So that's why this is going to take some prominence here. There's some discussion going on about proposing some changes in Zostera, which would affect some IUCN listings. So, or no, I'm sorry, those are separate. He has an, okay, so considering, John Coyer released a paper in 2013 looking at the genetics in the Zosteraceae, and he found pretty clear evidence to support separating the Zosteraceae into the Philospadics, and then Zostera, Nanozostera, and Hetrozostera. And then he also feels that we should just drop the Zostera geogenesis. Not sure how you say that. I'm not sure anybody studies that. Anybody? Okay, that might be an easy vote. I've got you cited on here as part of your evidence for doing this too. So the genus Nanozostera was based on an anatomical description from Tomlinson and Poslusny. I've never met either of these people. They went through a floristic description. It was really great. And then John Keogh blessed us with a revision of the genus Hetrozostera, originally described by Cornelius den Hartog, and also recognizing several species of Hetrozostera. So here's John Coyer's paper I already mentioned, sorry. And then John Coyer has now gone back and looked at the genetics and also feels like there's good evidence to support separating these species, genera. Sorry. Okay, so I talked about John Keogh's paper with the 4 Hetrozostera. So he describes Hetrozostera nigricollis, Hetrozostera polyclamus, and Hetrozostera tasmanica. There's also Hetrozostera chilensis, which genetically matches the Hetrozostera nigricollis. Fred feels like because the chilensis is geographically isolated, it might be worth keeping that species. So that's something to think about. Great. I like head shakes. I want you guys to get passionate. I'm going to remain neutral. So if you don't get passionate, maybe nobody will. Okay, so Nanozostera, these would be the smaller Zosteras, right? This one really turns some people inside out, I know it. So Nanozostera, if we change that, then we have Japonica, which really clearly is situated off the coast of Asia. The Muelleri, which is got 3 sort of, we call them subspecies, species. There's still not a lot of agreement on that. That's another whole other discussion. But those really cluster nicely down here around Australia, and then the Noltii in Europe and Capensis in Africa. So, so those species, if we were to change them to the Nanozostera, seem to map out pretty well. I think he just wanted to show there's some difference. I'm not sure what was going on there. So then we come to this Zostera geogenesis. Is that how you say that, Michelle? No? What? I don't know. We don't know. Nobody studies it. What Fred's told me is there were 2 populations that were described here, and now someone's gone back to look. They're no longer there, and the Cespitosa or Caspitosa, whatever you, it has taken over in that area and is pretty localized in that area as well. So go ahead. Do you have some info? This you? Wait. Do we have a microphone? Here. Yes, I would love it if people wanted to contribute to this discussion, because I'm going to just take notes.
So Fred and I actually discussed about this issue. I only looked at the specimen by photographs.
Wait, what's your name?
Sorry, my name is Masa Nakaoka from Hokkaido University, Japan. And I'm studying Zosteras in these regions. And I actually looked at the pictures of this type specimen, only by pictures, but it looks exactly like Zostera caespitosa. So I talked to Fred whether we need to really check this specimen. But so far, as far as I know, nobody has examined the type specimen of Zostera geogenes yet.
And how do you say it? How do you pronounce it? I'm just curious. How do you pronounce it?
I don't know. Zostera geogenesis?
Okay. Geogenesis.
I didn't know.
Geogenesis, I don't know. Okay. I'm not sure who described that. Hopefully they're not in this room. Okay, so that's the evidence on that one, if anyone wants to talk more about that. So basically, Fred would like to see this one just removed as a species. He doesn't think it ever really existed. This one, a little bit more contentious. Okay, are we ready for this? I also have to argue with this, but I'm not arguing today. So these are the three topics that Fred has brought up, at least at the last conference and at probably other conferences before. These are kind of reoccurring issues, and I think we're ready to take a vote. So all of you will be participating in the vote today based on my exceptional speech. And then Halodule, what's the consensus on pronunciation there? Both. Nobody cares. Okay. So there's two species of Halodule. I don't know. How do they say that in Latin? Does anybody know that?
Yes.
Halodule. There it is. Halodule. Halodule. Okay. So the Australians are wrong. That's what I'm hearing. Okay. Oh, Australia. So, yeah, so the first time that it was, or last time that it was collected was 1960, and then it hasn't been found since. And this is where Michelle was going to weigh in, possibly. You went to look as well, or someone you knew?
I've actually sequenced it. It's identical to the Caribbean side.
Okay. So either it never existed or it's been taken over.
No, there is a form of Halodule that is thinner and somewhat more rough to touch that actually does occur certainly in some populations.
Okay.
But there's no evidence that it's anything except ratio.
Okay, so there's some morphological variation, but it's not backed up by genetics. Is that right?
Yep, and Ron Phillips described the scenario very clearly in his 1969 paper. So it keeps coming up again because these names are in the literature, but they aren't supported by any evidence at this point.
Okay.
And the sequences are definitely, they're all the same.
They're all the same. Good evidence. We got two evidence makers here. I like this. It's not me. Okay, and then the last Halodule we're going to talk about is the Bermudensis. Was described from a specimen in Bermuda. And now two other seagrass scientists have gone to Bermuda and haven't been able to find it. Like, not sure when that was. I don't have any dates on that.
That's the last thing.
Oh, good. That's recent. I'm going to write that down. Okay. So,
So can I just preempt something?
yes. Do you want a microphone? I would like you to have one. Can we give Michelle one? You should be up here, probably, not me.
No, that's right. I'm specifically running a 1-hour session on Thursday afternoon to essentially address a way forward for this, because there's a separate process around recognising names taxonomically. There's a very formal process that's recognised by the taxonomic community. There's something called the International Plant Name Index, and all of the valid names are listed there. Then there's the process that we're trying to go through, which is which of those names we recognise in the field. And then there's also Fred's suggestion, which has come up many times over the last 15 years, that we include recognising genetic data. But how do we recognise that genetic data? And there have been very valid concerns about saying we recognise a species or not based on a little bit of genetic data. So I'm going to try to and with cause very valuable help here.
So what time is your seminar? Because I need to be there and make sure we don't. And, are you coming to the IUCN workshop?
If it's not clashing, I've got a bit of a clash thing going on. But
I need you.
I will try to be there.
I need you both.
But we, so very specifically in that, what I would like to get out of all the people who attend is a robust discussion on what we find acceptable as a way forward, because we do need to make some decisions, and revising these the status of these names in the red list has quite a lot of implications, including maybe leading to taxonomic work that needs to be done. So to prioritise some of that. So there's also...
So it sounds like we might be overlapping in our focus. So maybe...
Well, I am in fact running the workshop because this came up. So I'm trying to help.
Super.
I think one of the other things is that we have to really get our head around is seagrasses are unusual in respect of how difficult they are taxonomically. I work on a lot of groups now taxonomically, not just seagrasses, a whole bunch of other terrestrial plants. And I kid you not, all the people I work with and I'm the head of a herbarium, I'm the head of a taxonomic institution, I've just come off 3 years of being head of the Australian and New Zealand herbaria, where we talk about this stuff all the time, and seagrass has always come up as one of the most problematic groups. And the reason for that is their highly reduced characters, their lack of reproductive characters that you can use in taxonomy because they're highly reduced and they're hard to record, as well as the fact they are very plastic, and we don't have a good handle on that plasticity yet. So there are some really exciting research questions that need to be answered around these things we're looking at, but whether we try to put names on them, taxonomic names on them, is a very big question. As soon as you put a name on something, the burden of proof to get rid of a name is extremely high. There's several species I've been trying to sink, for want of a better word, for some time, but you have to be extremely careful and confident that what you're looking at is not a species, as opposed to being able to say there is a species. So some of this centres around that whole problem with not only the taxonomic process, but species concepts, yeah. So I would prefer us to perhaps not try to work out which ones are which here. Anyone who's really interested, come to the session on Thursday. I think it's 1 o'clock. And then we can apply that on Friday at the red listing process.
That sounds really good. So what time is the talk Thursday?
I think it's at 1. I don't know.
1 o'clock?
I think.
Does anybody have their
Apologies to those people who are getting up for the 3:30 in the morning field trip and then coming back.
Is that for real?
Yeah.
Because my workshop said 5 a.m. and I thought this is a typo.
It's because of the tides, so you need to go out at the right time.
My workshop does not need to be at 5 a.m. I'll say that real loud. Maybe more people will come if it's later. So Fred would like to change the status on these Halodule, I don't know, to likely extinct. He thinks they were species, probably based on what he's found, but thinks that they've probably gone extinct. Or are likely extinct, I think is the way he likes to say that. So if we go along with everything Fred wants, this would take out a species and then change the names of several others, which doesn't change their status, just their name. So I think that's why attending that lecture on Thursday would be good. Same thing here, changing the status on these to likely extinct up at the top. I can't hear. I'm so deaf. I'm sorry.
Why is Hetrozostera chilensis endangered?
It's only 2. Tim could actually speak to this, so I don't put my foot in it.
Hetrozostera chilensis, I would say, doesn't exist. It's Hetrozostera nigrocollis. But I think nigrocollis. The reason that Fred probably wants to keep it is because it's those 3 populations in Chile, and that's all.
There's 3 populations, and they're all clonal, from 2 genotypes.
Which invalidates its recognition under the IUCN rules, so we can't recognise it. So
IUCN doesn't recognise...
When you've got outlier populations that are clearly not part of the typical range, and they're not another species, it doesn't comply with what
Really?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
So we should be very careful about continuing to recognise it, especially because it's clonal, means it's probably been a long distance dispersal event. Whether it's human mediated or not doesn't...
That's my feeling.
Yeah.
That it probably... And you guys thought it was a more recent introduction because you could actually identify potential parents. It wasn't ancient.
Yeah, it's not millions of years ago or
And
hundreds of thousands of years ago.
It's not
Yeah,
flowering.
it's not flowering, it's clearly out of its range. It's probably just either one of those incredibly rare drift events or more likely it's come over on a boat.
Shipping, yeah. You guys weren't able to differentiate that, right?
It's almost impossible to do that, yeah.
Highly unlikely. So, Gary, does that answer your question or help us get to a resolution? You don't think it should be up here at all, is it? Oh, yes, here it is. Sorry. It's not down with its buddies. Okay. I think that's good. Yeah, I mean, my feeling is, having worked on the Nigrocollis, which is its cogener, they look exactly the same, and if Tim says they're the same, I believe it too. So if we don't feel like there's any basis for geographic separation as a species, I'm going to write down that note. How do you feel, Tim? Does anybody else have thoughts on this? Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, I really can't hear. I can only hear myself in double time.
What is the status of Zostera angustifolia, which is a phenotype of narrow leaf for Zostera marina?
My understanding, I'm not an expert, is that they're just described as different species, but genetically there wasn't a variation, and so we're considering it the same species, and you could call it a variety, I guess, if you wanted. I'm not actually sure if they're even recognizing it as a form.
Yeah.
So how would you notate that? Okay.
There's still people in the UK.
Would you like me to add that as an issue
Yes,
that we should
please.
talk about?
Yes, and they throw money on genetic analysis, and it's used sometimes in the environment agency documents on Zostera angustifolia, which is not correct. So please do it.
Okay, thank you. I'm not familiar with that species, which is why Fred should be up here. Anybody else? No? Okay, back to these, just changing these 2 here to recognize that they're likely extinct.
So I disagree with that vehemently.
Okay, we're getting to the vote part.
Well,
Well, go ahead.
I think if we accept them, we're overturning essentially an agreed upon taxonomy. So, and a lot of other evidence. So we do need to discuss it, but maybe putting down what the actual evidence is. So saying something's extinct really flags it in the IUCN process.
Yeah.
So we should be very careful about that.
So what you're saying is it probably didn't exist? Another one of those?
Well, I think, well, I'll talk about it on Thursday, but I think there is more than one Halodule in the Caribbean tropical Atlantic region, but there's at most 2, so we need to be thinking about how that fits in with these concepts. And so at the moment you would have to say data deficient as opposed to extinct, because we can't validate whether one of those might be this other form.
But
anyway.
I thought no one could find it, was what Fred said.
Well, but so someone I heard someone over here say, what is a species? So really, that's the fundamental part of this.
Yeah.
you go to Bermuda, you look for the form that corresponds to Bermudensis, which is always been rare, but essentially at the time it was described, it was the only thing found in Bermuda. The thing that they find in Bermuda now is definitely Wrightii-like. So does that mean it vanished, or does that mean the current prevailing conditions are enough different that it's growing different? We really don't know. So the thing that we would have to do is go and sample, say, some of the old herbarium specimens that are Bermudensis and compare them. So that's what we would, but that then becomes a research question that we have to prioritise to answer that, and that makes it data deficient. So we just have to go through that cycle rather than just saying, oh, just because someone went looking for it, they couldn't find it. That might be this plasticity issue.
Okay. So we're not going to get a vote. That's what you're saying.
Correct.
Damn. I promised to propel us past Fred's babies here, but that's okay.
Well, we can get past his list by saying that we need to do it differently.
Okay, so how many people really are unhappy with this idea of the Nanozostera?
So I want to add to the confusion.
Okay, great.
There is an equally likely scenario where we don't recognise any of the Nanozostera or Hetrozostera. We just have Zostera and we just have Phyllospadix, and morphologically that makes a lot of sense. There are definitely 4 lineages within Zostera, 4 very deep evolutionary lineages, within which there's been some other speciation. But why do we feel the need we have to put a name on it just because there's a deep branch? Morphologically,
more than genetics.
Morphologically, the characters that split them are difficult to identify until you're a real expert.
I would disagree with that, but
I have put material in front of experts from these different groups, and they've got them wrong.
Yes, and I know why.
Including Usher Polsniewski, who is one of the people who defined the characters that split them. So we just have to be aware that
the Nanozostera is maybe a little closer, I agree.
Yeah, and we also have locations where we have Nanozostera growing right next to Heterozostera, where they literally, you can't tell them until you sequence them. So
that's where, that's something that we will definitely talk on Friday, because I think it's a very clear morphological separation, and that there's actually been confusion amongst the scientists over the years that have published on the different names. So the names have been used, but the species are actually quite clear when you look at the different samples. So I'll show a great image of that I've put together.
Well, can you give that to me for Thursday?
I've been meaning to.
But also, I just think we have to be clear about why do we feel like we have to give them generic names? It's equally valid not to give them generic names, but recognising they're these deep branches. There can be morphological differences, but are they as different to each other as they are to Phyllospadix? I would argue absolutely not.
Tasmanica might be closer to Phyllospadix than Zostera.
In morphology?
Yeah.
I'll argue.
And I'll give you that I don't think the genetics are done. The genetics aren't done. They're not conclusive yet.
Anyway.
That's not my expertise.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great one. So I didn't see a whole lot of hands. Where's Rob Coles? I expected him to tear me down up here.
Rob apologised for not being here. He said,
I needed him.
Mitch, you can look after that one.
Okay. He really hates that idea, and I know that, so I'm going to put his vote down anyways. However, I'm going to take a vote just for information. We don't have to...
Technically, so can I just say technically, Nanozostera is the current genus name. It's recognised IPNI. No, under an International Plant Name Index, because of Jim Coyer's paper, it's now
changed.
It's not been changed. It's now the prevailing publication.
Okay, because the last time I was looking on there, it was Zostera with a synonymous.
Okay. Well, we should check that before Friday in case there's been a new change again, but these things change almost weekly sometimes.
Okay, so I am just going to take a vote, just because I want to gauge all of your interests before you fall asleep. I will get out of here, I promise. So, all in favor of Nanozostera? Any opposed? 2, because I know Michelle.
Like what, I'm sorry, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
What are the implications of changing the species name? I mean,
that's a great question.
Absolutely none.
Okay.
Other than a lot of paperwork for people who manage policy and collections institutions and stuff, and making it almost impossible for us to know in a paper whether someone who worked on Nanozostera or something or other in 50 years' time was talking about the same thing as Zostera or something or other today.
Habitats are changing.
It's essentially always going to be recognised as a synonym, which means an equally alternative name to Zostera tasmanica. So Nanozostera muelleri will always be equivalent to Zostera muelleri, and which one you recognise is dependent on which time period you're talking about. So
I think when we talk about like speciation and stuff, though, the interesting thing about the differences are, like, I think the Nanozostera grows like the rhizomes go out just one way, right? Heterozostera is multipodial, right? So there are actually variations, and
that's the theory.
And so the Heterozostera is totally different, and I could be in a boxing match with someone over how different that one is. But the Nanozostera Zostera is a more interesting one, and it is more trying to change it for people who've called like Zostera noltii for this long. What's the point of changing it? And I think that's Rob Cole's argument. Why would you even bother? We got all these other discrepancies and. Yeah. In the taxonomy, this isn't a high priority issue. Yeah. It's a smaller plant. It flowers lower. Well, some of the
Zostera muelleri can be huge. So seriously, it's really variable. It depends.
The other thing is Zosteras are confined to the northern hemisphere, and the southern hemisphere is the only place you find the Heterozostera, and then you have Nanozostera in both. So there's kind of an interesting geographic difference.
Which tells me it's a silly split. Anyway, so at the moment, it really doesn't, changing a genus name, unless it fundamentally changes how you recognise species, really doesn't make any, it's nomenclature, it is important, and there are reasons for doing it, and we have valid reasons for doing it both ways. So
I think also evolutionarily, right, the Zosteras are the original, like sort of the parent plant, and then the Nanozosteras evolved, and then the Heterozosteras evolved after that. So there is something also there in the phylogeny that's
yeah, but you don't have to give it a genus name to recognise evolutionary divergence times. Anyway, that's probably a personal discussion.
No, but you're right. I mean, we need to have these personal discussions because it does affect our work. It does matter. If you have to all of a sudden change what you're calling a species in your work, or feel like you should, it changes things. So I think it is an important conversation. Go ahead.
Well, all I got to say is that we've gone from Heterozostera to Zostera back to Heterozostera. And what it's doing is a lot of literature that's out there that deals with other ecological aspects. Phenological, ecological, ontological aspects are being lost in the literature, and I see a lot of repeat going on because we can't make up our bloody minds and stick with it. So my feeling is leave them all as Zostera. As an ecologist, I really don't care what the genus is called, as long as I can recognise the species differences.
Unless that has to do with the ecology, then it recognizes it.
You're trying to make it something.
I'm not trying to make anything. I said I'm going to come here and start a conversation.
Really, as long as the species is clearly circumscribed.
As long as the species are clearly circumscribed and there is a reason for grouping things at a genus level, like I said, they're equally valid options, you can go either way. Gary's point is a very valid one from the users of taxonomy perspective, keeping some consistency and not changing names without there being some other reason, like it might help you work out what you're looking at, then if you're going to be a pragmatic taxonomist, then you would take a conservative approach and leave the names as they are.
Okay.
And there has been an international move towards names having a wider grouping at the higher levels to show synergy in characters.
Yeah.
So there's equal reasons.
So we keep going around on this merry-go-round, which is fine. I'm fine with that. I like this.
Well, you had no votes for making it Nanozostera, right?
I had only one vote for keeping it too, though, so it's not a good sample. We're gonna have to vote again.
No, you didn't ask. You didn't ask whether we should keep it.
No, I know. I said anyone in favor of changing it.
Yeah, so none of us agreed to that.
And I said anyone against changing it, and I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
No, that was the point.
Well, if the argument is that it's the users of taxonomy that actually do matter, then I think it does matter. I mean, I don't know. I'm a field ecologist by training, if you can't tell. So I want to be able to go out into the field and at least know the genus what I'm working on. You know, to me that's really important. And speciation, I don't know. So we'll talk about species concepts, I guess, on Thursday, because I do think it's something we have to get to the bottom of to move forward on some of the research. But at least in Australia, we seem to have it all really just gunked up there. Sure. Yeah. Would you guys say your name when you speak? Because I know some of you guys by name, and then I don't know your...
I'm Stina Sorensen. I'm not a taxonomist. I'm not a geneticist. So I'm wondering, when we're talking about species, you can look at you can establish it or genetically if it is a different species. With genuses, can you do the same?
Sure.
But why the debate then?
And I'm not a geneticist, but my understanding is that what we're doing is we have to decide how many differences there need to be, right? So, and that changes different organisms have different...
The taxonomic hierarchy, there are no rules.
There's no rule.
There's absolutely no rules.
In general, come up here.
in general, you have more differences at the different hierarchy levels. Species are mostly similar to each other. Genera are grouped together with like species, but they're more different to each other than families. So it's a hierarchy. It's an artificial hierarchy, and it's not consistent in any group across the taxonomic world. Every one of them is different, and that's because species concepts are designed by taxonomists based on the features that they decide are important and get published, which follows a set of rules. Okay? The rules aren't about how different things are or similar they are or their evolutionary history. The rules are about a process of giving something a name. And if you've done that correctly, then that is a valid taxonomy. In this case, this particular instance, right now, there's 2 equally valid taxonomies that we haven't come to a conclusion about yet. And it's been flipping back and forwards, as Gary implied, for the last nearly 10 years now. And that's because different camps think equally that things could be either way.
There's also some real misinformation, and
that's right.
That's been like the taxonomic record has been lost or changed between, for instance, Australia and England and Germany. The people sending the samples from Australia were not the ones that were doing the naming over the sea, so it led to a whole lot of problems. That I think maybe that's how I came to this, was coming from the United States. We had Marina and Japonica, it was really clear, and then I went to Australia and it was like, well, some people call this, some people call this. I was like, wait, hold the I got to figure this out. Went to Michelle and she's like, it's not an easy solution. Don't go there.
And for Zostera Milleri, come to Cause Talk on Wednesday, and you'll find out just how complicated it is.
Yeah. Tim just told me of it. So Wednesday, what time? You don't know? Corjan has a talk on Wednesday about Milleri, Nanozostera, Zostera Milleri, and speciation, which has been, I think I showed that picture where there were four named, There used to be 4 if you count mucronata.
Yeah, with Muelleri.
Yeah.
So at the moment, they're all, the current correct naming in Australia is Zostera Muelleri with 4 subspecies.
Wait, you said Nanozostera was accepted now.
Not in Australia. In Australia, it's Zostera.
There's always a problem there. I can say that. I can say that. Can't I, Tim? He's like, I don't want to get into it. They don't like to talk about it. That's the problem. Okay, I think there's less, Nanozostera, I can understand it's a more global species. There's a lot less division, I think, for people who work on Hetrozostera nigricollis. I think we've got 1 species, or chilensis. They're the same. That's the geographic one. So pretty clearly different. I guess we don't have to take a vote today, but that is one fight I'm willing to have over gins if necessary. Anyways, does anybody feel strongly about this? Do you feel strongly about this? Okay, it's just me and you, Tim. All right, that makes that easy. But wait, how many people feel strongly? Yeah. Wait, before she asks her question, how many people feel strongly about the Nanozostera issue, one way or the other? You don't need it at all. You guys feel pretty strongly. 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I'm Jimena. My comment or question is that, yes, there are ecologists and there are taxonomists and there are people that don't work on either, I guess. But there's also other end users to this, like the managers and the people that make the decisions as far as conservation and things like that. The IUCN Red Listing ranking is critical.
Yes.
So, and that, in a way, for instance, for me, it leads back to me getting funding to do research. Yeah. So I think that that is also an end user that needs to be considered when we're talking about this, because I agree that if nigricollis and chilensis are the same, they shouldn't be 2 different species, but what does that mean for people who are doing research in Chile on the species? And
do you work in Chile on the species? Oh, damn it.
I saw a recent paper, though, so there are people doing it.
What's your paper?
No, maybe.
Tim and Craig Sherman been working on the paper about transmission across the ocean?
No. There was a paper on them, ecological. I have it out.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to see that.
Maybe it was in Spanish, I don't know. But anyway, I just wanted to remind people that there's other end users that need to be included in the conversation, not dominated, but included and considered, I guess.
Absolutely, and I think that is important. How does Chile feel about chilensis? You know, I'm not asking you to answer that. I just mean, I think that is a really important question to a person to consider. Entity, stakeholder. Okay. I've written that down. Nobody cares about Hetrozostera? That's great. And what about this geogenesis? I'm going with you, man.
So only I know is that it looks like Zostera caespitosa. And nobody has examined the description yet, as far as I know. Fred may know. If Fred already discovered it is the same with Zostera caespitosa, it will be okay, but I don't have any confirmation.
Okay, so maybe that's another one that needs we need to do the genetics on the herbarium samples?
I think the Korean researcher, if present, has more information, but I don't think anybody of them coming.
Okay. Michelle, did you have another comment?
We just need to check Mus's observation that it looks like a cespitosa and go from there. I mean, I thought that too when I looked at the type images, but someone actually needs to inspect the specimen. There's only, I think, 2 specimens of it, and they're the only known records. So
why not genetics on that one, but yes on the Halodule?
Well, you could do the genetics as well, but you don't need to if the specimen looks like another type specimen. very valid taxonomic process is just to say it's a synonym that was described without knowing the other material. That's all. It's probably, that happens all the time. There's like...
So it's morphologically different on the Halodule bermudensis in the right
Yeah,
hand?
correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And I think that's it. No, I was going to vote. There's no voting happening, I can tell. Everybody wants to go home. So there's lots of steps this week now. We've got Corjan's talk Wednesday. We've got Michelle's group Thursday at 1, potentially. And then the workshop where we are going to hash some of this out for good. So this was just to whet your palate and get you excited about taxonomy and the implications for our work. And also, I mean, like, I'm up here talking and like probably shouldn't be. I'm usually the person behind the curtain. This would be Fred. He'd be a little bit more knowledgeable about global species. I've worked really solidly in Australia and in the United States, west coast of the United States. So I am by no means an expert on this. I'm just here to facilitate. And yeah, really grateful that you came today, Michelle and Gary, and so that we can really have this conversation. It is important. And with that, I'd like to let you go because it is late. Unless there's anything else. Go ahead.
There is any case of hybridation between different species in seagrass? I don't know, between Zostera marina and Zostera norti or something like that, if someone knows?
Degrees of variation, is that what you're saying?
There's many examples now we're accumulating of hybridization, depending on the combinations of species, which lead me to suggest maybe the species concepts may be not right. Come to Cause Talk on Wednesday and you can look at an example. Yeah.
That's great. So your question was about hybridization and are we able to see any of that? And Corjan is going to have some more information about how this may have happened or is happening. Is happening. This is has happened. Because Coyer feels like it's all happening and he gets very excited about
So the global seagrass lineage mixing that's been happening is really, really an interesting phenomenon. It's confusing us in terms of what morphological traits are consistent. So it is a genuinely global problem, and we can't continue to only think about our species as our regional or local phenomena. They are genuinely operating on a global scale.
And that it's a constantly changing thing. This isn't something that once we decide it's solid and done, which is what makes taxonomy frustrating sometimes, but also it's recognizing something that's happening, a current kind of phenomenon. So your homework for Friday is to think about what makes a species, because we have to come up with an answer, like Michelle said, and Gary, if he said it even louder, we just have to make a decision and move on, because this has been going on and on and on. And I like taking votes, so let's do that, okay? What is a species? Think about it, dream about it. I'll see you Friday. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming.